Emily Watson was playing with her German Shepherd, Max, near her father's research cabin in the Alaskan taiga when the afternoon sunlight glinted off something metal in the distance. Without warning, 3 armed men burst through the cabin door, forcing the 7-year-old to scramble beneath the floorboards while Max lunged at the intruders with a ferocious growl. 6 hours later, as the merciless blizzard howled outside and darkness enveloped the forest, Emily crawled from her hiding place to find Max lying in the bloodstained snow, barely breathing, with paw prints leading back toward the cabin, and what she discovered inside made her blood freeze in her veins. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Eagle Summit, Alaska, wasn't on any tourist maps, nestled between endless stretches of pine forest and rugged mountains. The area was known primarily to researchers, hunters, and those seeking escape from civilization. Robert Watson's cabin stood as a lone testament to human presence among the ancient trees and snow-covered terrain, 15 miles from the nearest neighbor and 40 from the small town of Circle Hot Springs. The cabin itself was deceptively sturdy, built from thick logs with reinforced windows and a stone fireplace that kept the bitter Alaskan cold at bay. Robert had added solar panels, a generator, and satellite communications when he decided to make it their home base for his wildlife research 3 years ago. After his wife Catherine's death 8 months earlier, the cabin had become both sanctuary and prison for him and Emily. Emily Watson didn't look like the kind of child who could survive in such harsh conditions. Small for her 7 years, with honey blonde hair often escaping from messy braids and bright blue eyes that reflected her mother's, she possessed a quiet resilience that belied her delicate appearance. Since Catherine's fatal car accident, Emily had grown more introspective, her natural curiosity tempered by grief but never extinguished. She collected pine cones, tracked animal prints, and maintained meticulous journals just like her father taught her. Robert Watson had the weathered look of someone who belonged in this wilderness, tall and lean with a thick beard peppered with premature gray, a respected wildlife biologist specializing in predator-prey relationships. He'd chosen this remote location to raise his family away from the complications of urban life. Now a single father, he divided his time between his research and creating a stable environment for Emily, refusing all suggestions that they should move back to civilization for the child's sake. The third resident of the Watson cabin was Max, a 3-year-old German Shepherd with intelligent eyes and alert ears that missed nothing. Catherine had brought him home as a puppy just before her death, making him both a beloved companion and painful reminder. The dog had formed an extraordinary bond with Emily, sleeping at the foot of her bed each night and following her everywhere during daylight hours, his protective instincts seemingly heightened since Catherine's passing. Dr. Sarah Collins visited twice weekly, officially to assist with Robert's research but equally to check on Emily, a veterinarian and wildlife researcher herself. Sarah had been Catherine's closest friend and now served as the only maternal figure in Emily's life. "Remember, 3 days max," Robert said, zipping up his heavy-duty winter coat as he stood by the door. The early morning light cast long shadows across the cabin floor where Emily sat cross-legged with Max, feeding him bits of bacon from her breakfast. "I've got to document the wolf pack's movement before they migrate further north." Emily nodded solemnly. At 7, she was already accustomed to her father's research expeditions. "Sarah's coming today and tomorrow." "Twice daily," Robert confirmed, kneeling to meet his daughter's eyes. "Morning and evening, but you know the drill if she's late because of weather. Emergency supplies in the basement, satellite phone in my desk, and don't open the door for anybody except Sarah," Emily finished. "I know, Dad." Robert's weathered face softened as he pulled Emily into a tight hug. "That's my girl. I'll call on the satellite phone tonight." He ruffled Max's fur. "Take care of her, big guy." After her father left, Emily went through her morning routine, feeding Max, tidying her room, and completing the schoolwork Robert had prepared. Sarah arrived at noon, bringing fresh bread and news from town. Weather Service says there's a storm coming in faster than expected, Sarah mentioned while helping Emily with her science lesson. Your dad might need to cut his trip short. Emily glanced out the window at the pristine white landscape. Will you still come tomorrow? Sarah hesitated. I'll try, sweetie, but if the snow gets too heavy, I might not make it. You remember what to do if I can't get here. Stay inside. Keep warm. Don't worry, Emily recited dutifully. That night, Emily watched through the window as the wind picked up, swirling snow in spiraling eddies around the cabin. When her father called, the connection was already spotty. Storms earlier than expected, his voice crackled through the satellite phone. Might back late tomorrow. Don't. If Sarah can't. Dad, I can't hear you, Emily said, pressing the phone tighter to her ear. Fine. Max? Safe. Then the line went dead. The next morning, Emily woke to a world transformed. Snow had piled halfway up the windows, and the wind howled with such ferocity that the cabin's sturdy walls creaked in protest. By noon, when Sarah hadn't arrived, Emily wasn't surprised. She made herself a sandwich and tried the satellite phone, but only static answered. By evening, with the generator humming to maintain heat, Emily sat by the fireplace reading to Max when the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The sudden darkness sent her heart racing. It's okay, Max, she whispered, feeling for the flashlight she kept by the couch. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating Max's alert face. Dad showed us what to do. Remember? She had just lit the emergency lanterns when a strange sound caught her attention, metal scraping against metal, barely audible above the storm. Max's ears perked up, his body tensing. A low growl rumbled from his throat. Max, Emily whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The dog moved swiftly to the door, hackles raised. The scraping sound came again, followed by a distinct click that Emily recognized with horror. Someone was picking the lock. Hide, she whispered to herself, remembering her father's instructions. As Max's growling intensified, Emily scrambled toward the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards near the fireplace, a space her father had built for emergency supplies and valuables. She had just pulled the trapdoor closed when the front door burst open with a crash. Through the thin slats in the floor, Emily could see 3 pairs of boots stomp into the cabin, bringing swirls of snow and cold air. Shut the damn dog up, a harsh voice commanded, as Max launched himself toward the intruders with ferocious barking. Emily pressed her hands against her mouth to stifle a scream as she heard Max yelp in pain, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Search the place, ordered the same voice. The old man said it would be in Watson's papers. What about the kid? Asked another man. Watson's daughter is supposed to be here. Find her too. She might know where he keeps his research. Emily's breathing came in shallow gasps as footsteps moved around the cabin above her. Max's whimpering had stopped, and the silence terrified her more than anything. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she huddled in the darkness, listening to the men ransack her home, tearing through her father's desk and bookshelves. Nothing here, one of them eventually said. Maybe he took it with him. Damn it. And no sign of the kid either. She must be with someone in town. Let's wait for Watson to return. The storm's too bad to leave anyway. Emily remained perfectly still, even as her legs cramped and fear knotted her stomach. After what seemed like hours, when the voices had quieted and heavy snores filled the cabin, she dared to peer through the slats again. The men had settled in for the night, but there was no sign of Max. Summoning all her courage, Emily pushed the trapdoor open just enough to slip out. She had to find Max. The cabin floor creaked beneath Emily's weight as she crawled toward the kitchen, freezing at each sound. Moonlight filtered weakly through the snow-crusted windows, casting strange shadows across the ransacked living room. 2 men slept on the couch and floor, while a third, a tall figure with a beard, sat at her father's desk, head resting on folded arms. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might wake them. Where was Max? She'd heard him yelp. Then nothing. The thought that they might have killed her dog made her breath catch painfully in her throat. Gathering her courage, she inched toward the front door, which stood slightly ajar, probably damaged from being forced open. Through the gap, she saw a trail of disturbed snow leading away from the cabin. Following her instincts, Emily slipped through the opening, the bitter cold instantly biting at her face. "Max," she whispered into the darkness. The blizzard had momentarily calmed, allowing Emily to make out a dark shape in the snow about 20 feet from the cabin. Her stomach lurched as she recognized Max's distinctive form, lying motionless in a patch of blood-stained snow. Running to him, she fell to her knees beside his large body. "Max, please be okay," she sobbed quietly, placing a trembling hand on his side. To her immense relief, she felt the shallow rise and fall of his breathing. Max's eyes fluttered open at her touch, and his tail gave a weak thump against the snow. A deep gash ran along his shoulder, crusted with frozen blood. "You're hurt," Emily whispered, examining the wound. "I need to get you inside somewhere warm." But she couldn't take him back into the cabin with those men. Emily glanced around desperately, then remembered the old storage shed where her father kept his research equipment. If she could get Max there... A sound from the cabin made her freeze. The door was opening wider. Emily ducked behind a snowdrift, pulling Max's collar to urge him to stay silent. The dog seemed to understand, remaining perfectly still despite his pain. One of the men, the youngest, with dark hair, stepped outside, scanning the area. For a heart-stopping moment, his gaze passed over their hiding spot, but the shadows concealed them. After lighting a cigarette, he returned inside, muttering about the cold. Once the door closed, Emily whispered, "Come on, Max. We need to move." It took all her strength to help the injured dog limp toward the shed. Each step seemed to take an eternity, and twice Max stumbled, whimpering softly. When they finally reached the shed, Emily found the key in its usual hiding place beneath a rock and unlocked the door. Inside, the small space was cramped but mercifully free of snow. Emily quickly found the emergency blankets her father kept there and made a bed for Max. Using the first aid kit, she carefully cleaned his wound the way Sarah had once shown her. "You're so brave," she whispered, stroking Max's head as he winced. "Dad will be back tomorrow. He'll know what to do." As she bandaged Max's shoulder, Emily noticed her father's satellite phone on a shelf. He must have left the backup unit here before his trip. With trembling fingers, she turned it on, praying for a signal. One bar flickered weakly on the display. Emily dialed Sarah's number, her last hope for help. The connection crackled, barely functional. Sarah, it's Emily," she whispered urgently. "Emily, I can barely—" "You?" "Storm." Sarah's voice came through in broken fragments. "Men in the cabin. 3 men. Max is hurt. Dad's not back." Emily spoke rapidly, watching the battery indicator blinking dangerously low. "Try to help. Stay hidden. Coming." Then the phone died, leaving Emily unsure if her message had been understood. Had Sarah heard enough to know they were in danger? Would help come beneath a shelf? Emily discovered her father's research notebook, the special one he always kept locked in his desk. How had it gotten here? Had he moved it before leaving, sensing some danger? The leather-bound journal was filled with meticulous notes about wolf populations and environmental observations, but also contained several pages marked Evidence, with photographs of drums bearing industrial markings and notes about water samples. "What were you finding, Dad?" she whispered. Flipping through pages she only partially understood. A sudden commotion from the cabin drew her attention. Through the shed's small window, Emily saw flashlight beams sweeping the yard. They'd discovered her absence. "The kid's gone," a voice shouted. "And the dog." "She couldn't have gone far in this weather," another replied. "Check the perimeter." Emily clutched Max closer, her mind racing. The shed would be an obvious hiding place. They needed to move again. "Max, we have to go," she whispered, gathering the blanket around him. "Can you walk a little more?" The German shepherd struggled to his feet, his loyalty overcoming his pain. Emily tucked her father's notebook inside her jacket, then peered outside. The men were searching near the cabin, their backs to the shed. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and led Max toward the tree line, using the falling snow to cover their tracks. They'd just reached the first pine trees when Emily heard a shout behind them. "There, by the trees." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating them momentarily before Emily pulled Max deeper into the forest. Her heart hammered in her chest as they stumbled through snowdrifts, the voices behind them growing closer. Then Max suddenly stopped, his ears perking up. He turned his head toward a dense thicket of pines slightly uphill. Understanding his intention, Emily followed as Max limped determinedly toward what turned out to be a small natural hollow beneath the low-hanging branches of an ancient pine. The space was just big enough for both of them, concealed by snow-laden boughs. They huddled there, Emily's arms wrapped around Max's neck, listening to the men crashing through the forest around them. The flashlight beams passed dangerously close several times, but the hollow remained undiscovered. "We'll never find them in this wilderness at night," one man finally said, his voice carrying through the still air. "The kid will freeze to death anyway. Let's get back to the cabin and deal with Watson when he returns." As the sounds of the searchers faded, Emily released a shuddering breath. They were safe for now. But her father was heading back into a trap, and despite the temporary respite, they couldn't stay in the forest all night, not in these temperatures, and not with Max's injury. Emily looked at her loyal protector, who despite his pain kept vigilant watch at the entrance of their hiding place. "We'll rest a little," she whispered. "Then we need to find a way to warn Dad." The pre-dawn darkness clung to the forest like a shroud, broken only by the occasional wind-whipped snow flurry. Emily awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented until the weight of Max's head on her lap brought rushing back the nightmarish reality. They had dozed fitfully in their pine hollow. Emily's small body curled around Max's larger one for warmth. Now, as the first hint of gray light filtered through the branches, she knew they needed to move. "Max," she whispered, gently stroking his head. The dog's eyes opened immediately, alert despite his injury. Emily examined his bandaged shoulder with growing concern. The white gauze was stained with fresh blood, and Max winced when she touched near the wound. "We need to get you somewhere warm." Emily's tactical options were limited by her 7-year-old understanding, but she possessed something many adults lacked: intimate knowledge of their surroundings. For 3 years, she had explored these woods with her father, learning its secrets and pathways. If she could reach old Murphy's hunting cabin 3 miles north, they might find shelter and supplies. Murphy, a grizzled trapper who had befriended her father, only used the cabin during hunting season, still months away. With painful slowness, they emerged from their hiding place. Emily kept low, scanning for any sign of the intruders before helping Max navigate through the snow. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a crystalline world of white, broken only by the dark trunks of pine and birch. Under different circumstances, Emily would have found it beautiful. "This way," she encouraged Max, who limped gamely beside her, occasionally stopping to rest his injured leg. Emily consulted the position of the rising sun, remembering her father's lessons on navigation. "Just follow the ridge and look for the lightning-struck pine." As they traveled, Emily's mind churned with questions. Why had those men invaded their home? What were they looking for in her father's papers? The notebook pressed against her chest inside her jacket might hold answers, but deciphering her father's complex notes would have to wait. After an hour of slow progress, they reached a small clearing where Emily recognized Murphy's dilapidated cabin. The building wasn't much a one-room structure with a sagging roof and smoke-blackened windows, but it represented salvation. "Almost there, Max," she encouraged, noting how the dog's steps had grown increasingly labored. Finding the key beneath the overturned bucket where Murphy always left it, Emily unlocked the door. The interior was musty but dry, with a small wood stove, a cot, and basic supplies. Most importantly, it was far from the men at her father's cabin. Emily quickly set about making the space habitable. She found matches and kindling by the stove, carefully building a fire as her father had taught her. Once flames were crackling, she helped Max settle on a threadbare rug before the growing warmth. "Let me check your bandage," she murmured, gently unwrapping the blood-stained gauze. The wound beneath looked angry and painful, a deep gash that would need proper veterinary care. Emily found Murphy's rudimentary medical kit and cleaned the wound again with antiseptic, wincing at Max's whimper of pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I'm trying to help." As she worked, a memory surfaced: her mother, kneeling beside a much smaller Max, demonstrating how to check his paws for thorns. "Always be gentle but thorough," Catherine had explained. "Animals can't tell us where it hurts, so we have to be their voice." The recollection brought a fresh wave of grief. If her mother were here, she would know exactly what to do. With Max resting more comfortably before the fire, Emily finally allowed herself to examine her father's notebook. Most pages contained wildlife observations, meticulously documented with dates and locations. But toward the back, the tone changed. Her father's handwriting became more urgent, with underlined passages and exclamation points. Water samples contaminated. Mercury levels 10x normal. Drum markings match Northland Pharmaceuticals. Same subsidiary implicated in Yukon River case. Emily didn't understand all the technical terms, but she recognized the name Northland Pharmaceuticals. It was emblazoned on the side of the helicopter that occasionally landed at the small research station near town. Her father had always watched those helicopters with a frown. A folded paper fell from between the pages, a letter on official letterhead addressed to her father. Emily read slowly, her young mind piecing together the content. It appeared to be a rejection of her father's formal complaint about water contamination, dismissing his findings as inconclusive and insufficient to warrant investigation. The letter was signed by someone named Thomas Blackwood, Environmental Compliance Director. At the bottom, her father had scrawled, "Second rejection." "They're covering it up. Need more proof." Emily sat back, a coldness settling in her stomach that had nothing to do with the winter temperatures. Was this what those men were looking for? Evidence her father had collected against some company? A soft whine from Max interrupted her thoughts. The dog had raised his head, ears perked toward the window. Emily froze, listening intently. At first, she heard nothing but the wind, then faintly the mechanical growl of a snowmobile. Her heart leapt. Could it be her father returning early, or Sarah coming to check on them. Either way, they needed help. Emily moved to the window, standing on tiptoes to peer through the grimy glass. Her hopes shattered when she saw not her father's familiar blue snowmobile, but an unfamiliar black machine cutting across the clearing. The rider wore a dark jacket with a hood pulled low, obscuring their face. Max struggled to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Emily quickly gathered the notebook and retreated to the cabin's small closet, pulling Max in with her. Through a crack in the door, she watched as the cabin door swung open. The man who entered was the youngest of the three invaders, lean and dark-haired, with sharp features. He stood silently in the doorway, scanning the cabin interior before his gaze settled on the fresh fire in the stove. "I know you're in here," he called, his voice surprisingly soft. "I'm not going to hurt you." Max's growl deepened, and Emily placed a restraining hand on his neck, knowing he would attack despite his injuries if the man approached. "My name is Jake," the man continued, remaining by the door. "I just want to talk. I was your father's student at the university 3 years ago." This unexpected information made Emily pause. Her father occasionally mentioned his former students, though she couldn't recall this man's name. "Your dad and I were researching together before he moved here," Jake added. "I know why those men are at your cabin. I know what they're looking for." Still, Emily remained hidden, her father's warnings about strangers echoing in her mind. "Emily, right?" Jake took a step forward, then stopped when Max's growling intensified. "Look, I know you have no reason to trust me, but your dad's in danger, and I want to help." Unable to contain her concern, Emily called out from her hiding place. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "You broke into our home with those other men." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I infiltrated their group. I've been tracking them since they left Fairbanks. They work for Northland Pharmaceuticals, the company your dad's been investigating for illegal waste dumping." Emily clutched the notebook tighter. "Why should I believe you?" "Because your mother didn't die in an accident," Jake replied quietly, "and your father knows it." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She pushed open the closet door, facing Jake with wide, shocked eyes. Max limped to her side, positioning himself protectively between them. "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. Jake's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "Your mother was helping your father gather evidence against Northland. Her car crash happened the day after she photographed their waste disposal operation near Yukon Fork." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as the implication sank in. "Someone hurt my mom on purpose." Jake nodded solemnly. "Your father suspected it wasn't an accident, but he couldn't prove it. That's why he moved you both up here to keep you safe while he continued the investigation." Emily's mind whirled with this new information. It explained her father's increased protectiveness, his insistence on teaching her survival skills, the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. "The other men?" she asked, wiping away tears. "Who are they?" "Vince Harper is the leader, former military, now Northland's security consultant," Jake explained, making air quotes. "Tom Russo is his partner. They're here to find and destroy your father's evidence before he can take it to the federal authorities." "And why are you here?" Emily demanded, still uncertain whether to trust him. Jake hesitated, then reached slowly into his pocket. Emily tensed, but he produced only a worn photograph, a group of people in graduation gowns, her mother and father among them. "Catherine was my mentor before your father," he said quietly. "She believed in me when no one else did. When I heard rumors about Northland sending people after Robert's research, I knew I had to warn him. But I was too late, so I convinced them I could help find the evidence." Emily studied the photograph, recognizing a much younger version of the man standing before her. Grief and confusion battled within her, but one thought remained paramount. My dad's coming back today. They're waiting for him. Jake nodded grimly. Vince plans to force him to hand over all his evidence, including whatever he's carrying with him. They've already searched the cabin but haven't found his main research cache. It's here, Emily admitted, tapping the notebook inside her jacket. And there's more data drives and water samples in a waterproof case beneath the dock at Lake Point. Smart man, Jake murmured. We need to warn him before he reaches the cabin. Do you know which route he'll take back? Emily nodded. He always follows Ridge Trail when returning from the North Study area. It passes about a mile east of here. Then we don't have much time. Jake glanced at Max's bandaged shoulder. Your dog needs medical attention. His name is Max, Emily corrected. And he saved my life. Jake approached slowly, kneeling to examine Max's wound. The German Shepherd remained tense but allowed the inspection, his intelligent eyes never leaving Jake's hands. Military trained? Jake asked, noting the dog's disciplined behavior despite his injury. Emily shook her head. Mom said he was special. He was trained as a therapy dog first, then search and rescue. She called him her multi-talented miracle. Your mother always had good judgment, Jake said softly. I can clean this wound properly, but he'll need antibiotics soon. He reached for Murphy's medical kit, extracting proper bandages and antiseptic. As Jake worked on Max's injury with gentle efficiency, Emily watched his face carefully. His concern for Max seemed genuine, and the photograph provided tangible evidence of his connection to her parents. Still, caution kept her wary. If you're really here to help, she said finally, then help me find my dad before those men do. Jake finished bandaging Max's shoulder, then met her determined gaze. That's the plan. But Vince is dangerous, military trained, and ruthless. This isn't a game. I know it's not a game, Emily replied with a maturity beyond her years. They killed my mother and hurt Max. I want my dad safe. Jake studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'd better get moving. If your father follows his usual schedule, he'll be approaching Ridge Trail by noon. Outside, the morning had brightened into a clear, cold day. The storm had moved on, leaving a pristine landscape that would make tracking both easier and more dangerous. They would leave obvious trails in the fresh snow. As Jake prepared the snowmobile, Emily knelt beside Max, cradling his large head in her small hands. Can you make it a little further? Boy, we need to find Dad. In answer, Max struggled to his feet, eyes alert and determined despite his pain. Emily smiled through her tears, wrapping her arms around his neck. Thank you, she whispered. Mom was right. You are a miracle. The snowmobile cut through the pristine landscape, its engine growl echoing across the silent forest. Emily sat in front, wrapped in Murphy's spare coat with Max secured carefully behind her, his injured body sheltered in a makeshift sling that Jake had fashioned from a tarp. Jake drove with practiced skill, navigating between trees and over small ridges with the confidence of someone familiar with Alaska's challenging terrain. Ridge Trail begins just beyond that rock formation, Emily shouted over the engine noise, pointing toward a distinctive outcropping that rose like a sentinel from the snow. Dad always stops at the overlook to check for wolf activity. Jake nodded, adjusting their course. How much farther? About 10 minutes that way, Emily replied. There's a clearing where you can see the whole valley. The morning sun had climbed higher, its brilliance almost painful as it reflected off the unbroken snow. Under different circumstances, Emily might have marveled at the breathtaking beauty of her wilderness home, but fear for her father consumed her thoughts. Since Jake's revelation about her mother's death, memories had been surfacing, hushed conversations between her parents, her father's increasing paranoia about strangers, the security measures that seemed excessive even for remote Alaska. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked quietly, though the wind whipped her words away. "About Mom." Jake couldn't hear her specific question, but he seemed to sense her turmoil. "Your father wanted to protect you," he called back. "Some truths are too heavy for children to carry." They crested a small hill, and Jake cut the engine, allowing the snowmobile to coast to a stop at the edge of a clearing. Before them stretched a panoramic view of the valley, with Ridge Trail visible as a thin line winding through the trees below. "We should see him from here," Emily said, scanning the expanse of white. Jake pulled out binoculars from his pack, systematically searching the trail. "No sign of him yet. We might have beaten him here." Max suddenly lifted his head, ears perked forward intently. A low whine escaped him, his injured body struggling to rise despite the pain. "What is it, boy?" Emily asked, recognizing the alert posture. Jake followed Max's gaze, adjusting his binoculars. "There," he said tensely. "Movement on the far side of the ridge. Is that your father's blue snowmobile?" Emily squinted against the glare. "Yes. That's him, Dad," she called out instinctively, though the distance made it impossible for her voice to carry. Before Jake could respond, Max barked sharply, his attention shifting to another section of the trail. Jake swung his binoculars to follow and cursed under his breath. "What?" Emily demanded. "What's wrong?" "Vince," Jake said grimly. "On a snowmobile about half a mile behind your father, and he's moving fast." Emily's heart lurched. "He's going to catch him. We have to warn Dad." "We will." Jake stowed the binoculars and restarted the snowmobile. "Hold on tight." They descended toward the trail at a dangerous speed, the machine practically flying over small drops and bumps. Emily clutched the handlebars, her fear for her father overwhelming any concern for her own safety. Max remained surprisingly steady behind her, as if understanding the gravity of their mission. Ridge Trail came into view below them, a winding path through a section of less dense forest. Jake veered off their direct course, taking a route that would intercept the trail ahead of where Robert would pass. "If we can get in front of him, we can warn him before Vince catches up," Jake explained, navigating between closely spaced trees. The snowmobile burst from the tree line onto Ridge Trail just as a blue figure appeared around a bend ahead. Emily's heart soared at the sight of her father, recognizable even at a distance by his distinctive blue parka and the careful way he handled his machine. "Dad!" she screamed, waving frantically. Robert Watson spotted them, visible confusion crossing his features as he registered his daughter's presence on a strange snowmobile with an unknown man. He slowed his approach, caution evident in his posture. Jake brought their snowmobile to a halt in the middle of the trail, creating a blockade. As Robert drew closer, his confusion transformed to alarm at the sight of Max's bandaged body and Emily's disheveled appearance. "Emily, what's happening?" he called, killing his engine 20 feet away and dismounting with swift, protective movements. "Dad behind you," Emily cried, pointing back down the trail. "There's a man coming. He broke into our cabin with others. They're looking for your research." Jake stepped forward, hands raised, non-threateningly. "Dr. Watson, my name is Jake Miller. I was your student at University of Alaska. We don't have much time. Vince Harper is right behind you." Recognition flickered across Robert's weathered face. "Miller, from Catherine's research team." "Yes, sir. I've been tracking Northland's security team. They know you're planning to take your evidence to the federal authorities next week." Robert's expression hardened as he processed this information, his eyes darting to Emily and Max. "You're hurt," he said, moving quickly to examine his daughter and the injured dog. "Max protected me," Emily explained, fighting tears as her father's strong arms encircled her. "They hurt him, Dad. And Jake says they're the ones who hurt Mom." Pain flashed across Robert's face before it settled into grim determination. "You know about Catherine," he said to Jake. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. "Enough to understand what's at stake," Jake confirmed. "Vince Harper is coming up the trail now. He's armed and has already demonstrated he's willing to use force." A distant engine sound punctuated his warning. Robert immediately snapped into action, opening his saddlebag to extract a small waterproof case. "The evidence against Northland," he explained, handing it to Jake. "Water and soil samples from their dump sites, plus photographic documentation. When combined with what's in my research notebook—" "I have it," Emily interrupted, patting her jacket. "I took it from the shed." Pride momentarily replaced fear in Robert's eyes. "Smart girl." He turned back to Jake. "There's a federal environmental crimes investigator in Circle Hot Springs, Tom Harmon. He's been building a case against Northland for months." Jake nodded. "I can get this to him, but first we need to get you and Emily to safety." The sound of the approaching snowmobile grew louder. Robert quickly assessed their options, his experienced gaze scanning the surrounding terrain. "There's an old mining access road about quarter-mile east," he said decisively. "Too narrow for snowmobiles, but we can make it on foot. It leads to the ranger station at the north property boundary." "I'll draw him off," Jake offered. "Buy you time to reach the access road." Robert hesitated, clearly uncomfortable trusting a man he barely knew with their safety. Emily placed a small hand on her father's arm. "Jake helped us. Dad, he found us at Murphy's cabin and treated Max's wound. I think he's telling the truth." After a moment's consideration, Robert nodded. "Okay. But Emily and Max come with me. We'll head for the access road while you lead Vince away from our trail." "No," Jake countered firmly. "Max can't make that journey with his injury, and Emily can't carry him. I'll take them on my snowmobile to the ranger station by the main road. You create a false trail to the mining road, then double back to meet us." The approaching engine grew dangerously loud. They had seconds, not minutes, to decide. "Dad, please," Emily pleaded. "Max needs help soon." Decision made. Robert quickly transferred essential supplies from his snowmobile to Jake's. "The ranger station is 7 miles northwest. Sarah should be there. She's been coordinating the storm response." "I know where it is," Jake assured him, helping Emily remount the snowmobile with Max. "Wait," Robert said, his voice breaking slightly as he pulled Emily into a fierce hug. "Be careful, sweetheart. I'll find you, I promise." "I know you will," Emily whispered, clinging to him briefly before releasing her grip. Robert turned to Jake, his expression intense. "Keep them safe, or I will find you. Understand?" Jake nodded solemnly. "You have my word." "Go now," Robert urged, already moving toward his own snowmobile. "I'll make sure Vince follows me." With a final glance at her father, Emily held tight as Jake restarted their engine. They accelerated away from the trail, cutting across virgin snow toward a dense section of forest behind them. Emily saw her father mount his snowmobile and head in the opposite direction, deliberately leaving obvious tracks in the pristine snow. They had just reached the tree line when a third snowmobile roared into view on Ridge Trail. Even at a distance, Emily could sense the menace in the rider's posture. Vince paused only momentarily at the intersection of tracks before following Robert's more obvious trail. "He took the bait," Jake said with relief, navigating between trees with careful precision. "Your father knows these woods better than anyone. He'll lose Vince in the backcountry." Emily wanted to believe him, but fear still clutched at her heart. "What about the other men, Tom, and the third one?" "They were still at your cabin when I left," Jake replied, guiding them through an area of waist-deep snow. "Without snowmobiles, They won't be factors until we're long gone." Max whimpered as the snowmobile bounced over a fallen log, his injury clearly causing him significant pain. Emily stroked his head reassuringly. "Just a little longer, boy. We'll get you help soon." The forest thinned as they approached a more traveled route, the main access road that connected the scattered properties in this remote region. Jake increased their speed, clearly anxious to reach the ranger station before complications arose. They had traveled perhaps 2 miles when a sharp crack split the air. Jake instinctively ducked, swerving the snowmobile behind a large boulder. "What was that?" Emily gasped, though she feared she already knew. "Gunshot," Jake confirmed grimly, cutting the engine and scanning their surroundings. "Behind us on the road," Max growled softly, his eyes fixed on the trail they had just traveled. Despite his weakened state, the German shepherd's protective instincts remained fully engaged. "Is it Vince?" Emily whispered, pressing close to Max. Jake peered carefully around the boulder. "Can't tell. Either Vince gave up chasing your father, or the third man had another snowmobile," Emily finished, her young mind putting the pieces together with disturbing clarity. Jake nodded grimly. "We need to move into deeper cover. Can you help Max walk?" Emily nodded, carefully helping the injured dog from his makeshift sling. Max struggled to his feet, determination overcoming pain as he had done repeatedly during this ordeal. Abandoning the snowmobile, they pushed through the snow toward a dense thicket of pines about 50 yards away. Max limped beside Emily, occasionally stumbling but refusing to stop. Jake brought up the rear, constantly checking behind them for pursuit. They had almost reached the protective cover of the pines when another shot rang out, closer this time. A spray of snow erupted just feet from where they moved. "Run!" Jake shouted, pushing Emily ahead of him. Emily wrapped her arms around Max's neck, half dragging the weakened dog toward the trees. They plunged into the thicket, sharp branches scratching at their faces and catching on their clothing. Behind them, Jake stopped at the edge of the trees, drawing a pistol Emily hadn't realized he carried. Another shot cracked through the air, and Jake ducked behind a tree trunk. When he glanced back at Emily, his expression was deadly serious. "Keep going," he instructed. "Stay low and head northwest. You'll hit the main road in about half a mile. Follow it to the ranger station." "What about you?" Emily asked, sudden fear gripping her. "I'll keep them busy," Jake replied, checking his weapon. "Give you time to reach safety." "But—" "Emily, listen to me," Jake interrupted, his voice softening despite the urgency. "Your father trusted you with his most important research because he knows how capable you are. Now I'm trusting you to get Max to safety and find help. Can you do that?" Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she nodded firmly. "I can, but you have to promise to be careful." A sad smile flickered across Jake's face. "I promised your mother once that I'd help protect what matters. I intend to keep that promise." He reached into his pocket and pressed the small waterproof case into her hands. "Keep this safe, too. Now go." Another shot splintered bark from a nearby tree, emphasizing the urgency. Emily gave Jake one last desperate look before turning to guide Max deeper into the forest. Behind her, she heard Jake moving in the opposite direction, deliberately making noise to draw attention away from her escape route. "Come on, Max," she whispered, forcing herself not to look back as more shots echoed through the trees. "We need to find help, for Dad and for Jake." The injured German shepherd seemed to understand the gravity of their situation. Despite his worsening condition, he pressed forward, his loyalty and courage pushing beyond normal canine limits. Together, they disappeared into the forest depths, leaving behind the sounds of a confrontation whose outcome they could not know. The forest seemed to close in around Emily as she and Max pushed forward through deepening snow. The gunshots had stopped several minutes ago, leaving behind an ominous silence broken only by their labored breathing and the occasional distant crack of ice-laden branches. Emily tried not to think about what the silence might mean for Jake. "Northwest," she reminded herself, scanning the sky for glimpses of the sun through the thick canopy. Her father had taught her that moss grew predominantly on the north side of trees in these woods, and she used this knowledge to maintain their direction, moving from one mossy trunk to another. Max's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The German shepherd stumbled more frequently now, his breathing ragged and his bandage soaked through with fresh blood. Each time he fell, it took longer for him to rise again, but the loyal dog refused to quit, driven by some deep instinct to protect his young charge. "You're the bravest dog in the world," Emily told him during one such rest, kneeling to stroke his graying muzzle. "Mom would be so proud of you." At the mention of Catherine, Max's ears perked up momentarily, his eyes searching Emily's face with such intelligence that it nearly broke her heart. In those brown depths, she saw not just pain but steadfast devotion, the same look her mother had worn when promising everything would be all right, even when Emily suspected it wouldn't. After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, the trees began to thin. Through the gaps, Emily spotted what had to be the main road, a wide, plowed strip cutting through the wilderness. Relief flooded her until a new sound reached her ears, the distant rumble of a snowmobile. "Someone's coming," she whispered to Max, pulling him deeper into the tree line. "We need to see who it is before we show ourselves." They crouched behind a fallen log, watching as a snowmobile came into view. Emily's heart sank when she recognized the rider's dark jacket and imposing build. It was Vince, moving slowly along the road, clearly searching for signs of their passage. How had he found them? Had he somehow overpowered her father? The thought sent ice through her veins. She clutched Max closer, praying he wouldn't make a sound as Vince stopped his snowmobile almost directly across from their hiding place. The man cut the engine, an eerie silence falling over the landscape as he dismounted and began examining the ground methodically. "I know you're nearby, kid," he called out, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Your tracks in the snow lead right to this area. Why not make it easier on everyone and come out now?" Emily remained perfectly still, one hand resting on Max's muzzle in a gentle reminder to stay quiet. The wounded dog seemed to understand, not making a sound despite his pain. "Your father's been in an accident," Vince continued, his tone falsely concerned. "He needs help. If you come with me now, I'll take you to him." Emily almost gasped before catching herself. Was it true? Had her father really been hurt? But something in Vince's voice, a slight edge that didn't match his concerned words, told her he was lying. "I don't want to hurt you or the dog," Vince added, moving closer to the trees. "But this is bigger than you understand. Your father has information that could damage a lot of important people. He's being irresponsible, risking your safety for his personal crusade." Emily's hands clenched into fists. This man was talking about her father's evidence of environmental crimes, evidence that might prove Northland Pharmaceuticals had killed her mother. Nothing about that was a personal crusade. Vince took another step toward the forest edge. "I'm going to search these woods. Emily, it would be better for everyone if you showed yourself now." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a handgun, checking it with practiced efficiency. "Much better." Terror gripped Emily as Vince entered the tree line, beginning a systematic search pattern that would eventually lead to their hiding place. She looked desperately at Max, whose eyes reflected her fear, but also held something else, determination. With painful effort, Max struggled to his feet. Before Emily could stop him, the injured German shepherd limped away from their hiding place, deliberately making noise that drew Vince's attention in the opposite direction from Emily. "Max, no," Emily whispered desperately, but it was too late. Vince swung toward the sound, a triumphant smile crossing his face as he spotted the wounded dog. "There you are," he said, raising his weapon. "Where's your little mistress? I wonder—" Emily knew she had seconds to act. Max had given her an opportunity, perhaps their only one, to escape, but she couldn't leave him behind to face Vince alone. In a split-second decision that her father would have called reckless and her mother would have called brave, Emily burst from hiding, grabbing a fallen branch as she ran. Vince, momentarily distracted by Max, didn't see her until she was nearly upon him. "Leave him alone!" she screamed, swinging the branch with all her 7-year-old strength. The makeshift weapon caught Vince across the arm, causing him to stumble and his shot to go wide. Max, seizing the moment despite his weakness, lunged at the man's leg, jaws clamping down with the last of his strength. Vince howled in pain and anger, trying to shake off the dog while keeping his balance. "You little—" he snarled, reaching for Emily. She darted back, terrified but determined to protect Max. "Run! Max, run!" she commanded. Though she knew the injured dog could never outpace Vince, what happened next occurred so quickly that Emily would later struggle to piece it together. Vince aimed his weapon at Max, his face contorted with rage. Emily screamed and threw herself toward the dog. A gunshot cracked through the air, but it didn't come from Vince's weapon. The big man jerked backward, a look of surprise crossing his face before he collapsed into the snow. Behind him, barely visible through the trees, stood Tom Russo. The third man from the cabin, his own gun still raised. "Don't move," Tom ordered, though whether he was speaking to Vince or Emily wasn't clear. Vince groaned, clutching his shoulder where blood was rapidly staining his jacket. "You traitor," he gasped. "Corporation won't forgive this. Russo—" "Federal Agent Thomas Harmon," Tom corrected calmly, producing a badge from inside his jacket. "And the corporation is about to have much bigger problems than me." Emily stood frozen, unable to process this new development. The man she'd feared as one of her pursuers was actually the federal investigator her father had mentioned. How was that possible? "You're the environmental crimes investigator?" she asked shakily. "Tom, or rather—" Agent Harmon nodded without taking his eyes off Vince. "Been undercover with Northland's security team for 8 months. Your father has been my confidential informant." Relief washed over Emily, quickly followed by renewed fear. "My dad—" "Vince said he was hurt. Your father's fine," Harmon assured her. "I passed him on the trail about 10 minutes ago, heading for the ranger station. He was worried sick about you." Emily nearly collapsed with relief, stumbling over to Max, who had slumped to the ground, his brave effort exhausting the last of his strength. "Max needs help," she said urgently, stroking his heaving side. "He's been bleeding for hours." Harmon quickly secured Vince, zip-tying his hands before kneeling to examine Max. His expression grew grave as he noted the severity of the dog's wound and weakened condition. "We need to get him to a vet immediately," he confirmed, removing his outer jacket to wrap around the shivering animal. "The ranger station has emergency veterinary supplies. Can you help me carry him to my snowmobile?" Together they carefully lifted Max, who whimpered softly but made no attempt to resist. Emily whispered constant reassurances as they made their way back to the road where both Vince's and Harmon's snowmobiles waited. "What about Jake?" Emily asked as Harmon secured Max to his vehicle. "He stayed behind to protect us. I heard gunshots." A shadow crossed Harmon's face. "Jake Miller was shot by Harper's other associate. He managed to take down the shooter, but he was badly wounded when I found him." Emily's heart sank. "Is he—" "He was alive when the medical helicopter picked him up," Harmon said carefully. "But his condition was critical. He kept mumbling about a promise to Catherine, I assume he meant your mother." Tears filled Emily's eyes. Jake had sacrificed himself to fulfill a promise to her mother, a promise to protect what mattered. And what had mattered most to Catherine Watson had always been her family. As they prepared to leave, Emily suddenly remembered the waterproof case Jake had given her. She withdrew it from inside her jacket, offering it to Harmon. "The evidence against Northland," she explained. "Dad said it proves everything." Harmon accepted the case with visible relief. "This, combined with what I've gathered under cover, should be enough to bring Northland down for good." They left Vince secured in the snow, Harmon radioing ahead for officers to collect him. As their snowmobile sped toward the ranger station, Emily cradled Max's head in her lap, terrified by how still he had become. His breathing was shallow, each exhale creating small clouds in the frigid air that seemed to diminish in size with every passing minute. "Hold on, Max," she pleaded, tears freezing on her cheeks in the rushing wind. "Please, hold on. We're almost there." But Max's eyes had taken on a distant look that frightened Emily more than anything else that had happened. It was the same expression she'd seen in her mother's eyes in the hospital, just before she slipped away forever. The realization that she might lose Max, too, her protector, her friend, her last living connection to her mother, was too much to bear. "Don't leave me," she whispered, bending close to his ear as the ranger station came into view ahead. "I still need you. Please don't go." Max's tail gave one feeble thump against her leg, but his eyes were closing, his mighty heart slowing as it pumped what little blood remained through his loyal body. By the time they reached the station, where her father was waiting with park rangers and emergency personnel, Max lay unmoving in Emily's desperate embrace. "Emily!" Robert Watson's voice cut through the chaos as Harmon's snowmobile skidded to a stop outside the ranger station. Emily barely registered her father rushing toward her, his face etched with worry and relief. All her attention remained fixed on Max's still form cradled in her arms. "Dad, it's Max," she cried as her father reached them. "He's not moving anymore. Help him, please." Robert quickly assessed the situation, his experienced hands checking Max's vital signs. "He's alive, but barely," he confirmed, his voice tight with urgency. "Let's get him inside now." The next few minutes passed in a blur. Rangers and emergency personnel swarmed around them, carefully transferring Max from the snowmobile onto a stretcher. Emily refused to let go of his paw as they carried him into the station's emergency medical room, which had been hastily converted to accommodate both human and animal casualties during the winter storm. Inside, to Emily's immense relief, stood Dr. Sarah Collins, pulling on surgical gloves with efficient movements. "The storm trapped me here overnight," she explained, immediately moving to examine Max. "Thank God it did." "Sarah, he's lost so much blood," Robert said, one arm wrapped protectively around Emily's shoulders. "Gunshot wound to the shoulder, at least 12 hours old." Sarah's face remained professionally calm, but Emily caught the flash of anger in her eyes. "Emily, sweetie, I need to work on Max now. Your dad will take care of you while I help him, okay?" Emily nodded mutely, allowing her father to guide her to a chair in the corner of the room, though her eyes never left Max's still form. As Sarah cut away the blood-soaked bandages to reveal the full extent of the damage, Emily buried her face in her father's chest, unable to watch. "Max saved me, Dad," she whispered. "The men came to the cabin, and he attacked them when they tried to tie me up. Then he found me in the forest and led me to safety. He kept protecting me even when he was hurt so badly." Robert held her tighter, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "That doesn't surprise me at all. Your mother always said Max would give his life for his family. He thinks you're his to protect. The mention of her mother opened a flood of questions Emily had been holding back. Jake said Mom didn't die in an accident. He said the pharmaceutical company killed her because she was helping you gather evidence against them. Is that true? Her father stiffened, then seemed to deflate, years of carried secrets weighing visibly on his shoulders. I suspected it, he admitted quietly. Catherine discovered their illegal dumping operation and documented it too thoroughly. The day after she uploaded her findings to a secure server, her car's brakes failed on Mountain Pass Road. He paused, struggling with the painful memory. The official investigation ruled it mechanical failure, but I knew better. That's why we moved here. I thought we'd be safer while I continued her work. Emily processed this revelation, connecting it with everything she had learned. That's why you built the hidden compartment under the floor, and why you taught me all those survival skills. Robert nodded sadly. I wanted to tell you when you were older, when you could understand better. I never imagined they would find us here, or that you would be put in danger. Before Emily could respond, Agent Harmon entered the room, his expression grave but determined. Watson, we need to talk. My team has apprehended the third suspect and secured your cabin, but there's something you should know about Jake Miller. Emily's attention snapped to Harmon at the mention of Jake's name. Is he alive? She asked desperately. Harmon hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share with the child. He's been airlifted to Fairbanks Memorial. His condition is critical but stable. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. Relief washed over Emily, though tempered by the knowledge that Jake remained in danger. He saved us, she told her father. He could have escaped with the evidence himself, but he stayed behind to protect Max and me. Robert's expression softened with gratitude and regret. Jake was Catherine's favorite student. She always said he had more integrity than most adults she knew. I should have trusted him sooner. Harmon cleared his throat. There's more you should know. We found evidence in Vince Harper's possession indicating Jake has been investigating Catherine's death independently for the past 3 years. He infiltrated Northland's security team specifically to find proof that her car was tampered with. This new information hit Robert like a physical blow. He sank into a chair beside Emily, running a hand across his face. All this time, I thought I was alone in this fight, he murmured. Catherine would be so disappointed in me for not reaching out to her colleagues. Dad, you were trying to protect me, Emily said, with a wisdom beyond her years. Mom would understand that. From the medical table, Sarah called out, I've stabilized him, but he needs blood and specialized care immediately. The storm's cleared enough for medical transport. We need to get him to the veterinary hospital in Fairbanks now. Hope and fear warred in Emily's heart as she rushed to Max's side. The German shepherd lay unconscious, multiple IVs attached to his leg and an oxygen mask fitted over his muzzle. Even in his sedated state, his body seemed to respond to Emily's touch, a barely perceptible movement of his tail against the table. Will he make it? She asked Sarah, her voice trembling. Sarah placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. Max is the strongest dog I've ever known, and he has something powerful to live for, she said, nodding toward Emily. But I won't lie to you, his condition is very serious. The next 24 hours will be critical. Within minutes, arrangements were made for Max to be transported via emergency helicopter to Fairbanks Veterinary Hospital. As the medical team prepared him for transport, Emily leaned close to his ear. You have to fight, Max, she whispered fiercely. Remember what Mom used to say, our family doesn't give up, not ever. I'll be waiting for you, I promise. Robert gently pulled Emily back as the technicians lifted Max's stretcher. We'll follow them to Fairbanks, he assured her. Agent Harmon has arranged transportation for us. As they watched the helicopter lift off, carrying Max toward his uncertain fate. Emily felt a strange calm settle over her. The past 24 hours had stripped away her childhood innocence, forcing her to confront truths about the world that most adults struggled to accept: that people could be cruel and calculating, that justice didn't always come easily, that sometimes the price of doing the right thing was unbearably high. But those hours had also revealed other truths about loyalty that transcended species, about courage that defied age, about love that continued beyond death. Her mother's spirit had been present throughout this ordeal, guiding them through Jake, through Max, and through Emily's own intuition. "Agent Harmon," she said suddenly, turning to the federal investigator who stood nearby. "The notebook I gave you, did you look at it?" Harmon nodded. "I did. Your father's documentation is meticulous, combined with the water and soil samples, and my undercover recordings. We have more than enough to bring federal charges against Northland's executives." "What about Mom's accident?" Emily pressed. "Will someone be punished for that too?" A shadow crossed Harmon's face. "That's more complicated. Criminal cases require evidence beyond reasonable doubt, and after 3 years—" "I may have that evidence," a new voice interjected. Everyone turned to see a ranger supporting a bandaged man who limped slowly into the room. With a shock, Emily recognized Jake Miller, his face pale and drawn with pain, but very much alive. "Jake!" she cried, running to embrace him carefully around his uninjured side. "They said you were being taken to the hospital." Jake winced, but returned her hug with his good arm. "I convinced the medics I wasn't that badly hurt. Flesh wound, mostly," he added, though the paleness of his face suggested otherwise. "I couldn't leave until I knew you and Max were safe." Robert approached slowly, emotions warring across his weathered face: gratitude, suspicion, and hope. "Harmon says you've been investigating Catherine's death." Jake nodded, leaning heavily against the ranger for support. "She was more than my professor. Catherine saved me from a self-destructive path and showed me how to channel my anger into meaningful action. When she died and the authorities ruled it an accident despite the suspicious circumstances, I couldn't accept it. So you went undercover," Robert concluded. "Alone, without backup." "Not entirely alone," Jake corrected, reaching carefully into his jacket to withdraw a small flash drive. "I had help from Catherine's former colleague at the university's computer sciences department. We recovered deleted emails from Northland Server's executives discussing the Watson problem and authorizing permanent solutions. The timestamp is 1 day before Catherine's brakes failed." Agent Harmon took the flash drive, his expression hardening. "This changes everything, with electronic evidence linking Northland's leadership directly to discussions of eliminating Catherine. We can prove it wasn't an accident," Robert finished, his voice thick with emotion. "Catherine will finally have justice." Throughout this exchange, Emily had been processing a startling realization. "You knew my mother was in danger," she said suddenly to her father. "That's why you gave her Max." Robert looked startled. "What? Max isn't just a regular dog, is he?" Emily continued, pieces falling into place. "Mom said he was special, multiply trained. He was supposed to protect her." Pain and guilt washed across Robert's face. "Yes," he admitted softly. "When we first received threats, I arranged for Max through a connection who trained protection dogs for high-risk journalists. But Catherine often left him home with you, saying you needed his protection more than she did." His voice broke. "She was always putting everyone else first. She knew, didn't she?" Emily whispered. "She knew something might happen to her?" Robert nodded, unable to speak. Jake stepped in gently. "Your mother left something with me before she died, a letter for you, to be given if anything happened to her." I've carried it all this time, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew an envelope from an inner pocket, the paper creased and worn from years of safekeeping. With trembling hands, Emily accepted the letter. Her name was written on the front in her mother's distinctive handwriting, the sight of it bringing a fresh wave of grief and longing. I'm not sure I can read it yet," she admitted. "Whenever you're ready," her father assured her. Catherine would understand. The room fell silent as each person processed the revelations and emotions of the moment. The stillness was broken by Agent Harmon's practical voice. "We need to get everyone to Fairbanks," he said. "Watson, your evidence needs formal processing, and Miller requires actual medical attention despite his stubborn insistence otherwise. Most importantly, Emily should be with Max during his treatment." The mention of Max instantly refocused Emily's attention. "How long until we can leave?" she asked anxiously. "Transport is waiting outside," Harmon replied. "We can leave immediately." As they prepared to depart, Emily carefully tucked her mother's letter into her jacket pocket. Next to her heart, the paper felt warm against her chest, as if carrying some essence of Catherine within its fibers. Though she wasn't ready to read it yet, its presence gave her strength. Outside, the winter afternoon was beginning to fade, the endless Alaskan twilight casting long purple shadows across the pristine snow. Emily paused at the doorway, looking back at the ranger station that had become an unexpected sanctuary in their time of crisis. "What happens now?" she asked her father as they walked toward the waiting vehicle. Robert's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Now we fight for Max," he said firmly. "And when he's recovered, we make sure Northland faces justice for everything they've done to the environment, to the people they've harmed, and to our family." Emily nodded, drawing strength from her father's resolve. The path ahead would be difficult, Max's recovery uncertain. The legal battles against Northland likely long and complex, and their own emotional healing just beginning. But for the first time since losing her mother, Emily felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. As their vehicle pulled away from the ranger station, Emily looked through the rear window at Jake, who followed in another car. He raised his good hand in a gesture that somehow conveyed both reassurance and determination. In that moment, Emily understood that her mother's legacy lived on not just in her research or in the justice they would seek, but in the connections she had forged: a student who became an ally, a dog who embodied loyalty, and a daughter who had discovered her own courage when it mattered most. The letter pressed against Emily's heart seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, a promise waiting to be revealed when she was ready to hear her mother's final words. Whatever Catherine had written, Emily knew one truth with absolute certainty: her mother would be proud of them all. 3 weeks later, Emily sat in a chair beside a hospital bed in the Fairbanks Veterinary Hospital's recovery ward, her small hands gently stroking Max's head as he slept. The German shepherd's powerful body was thinner now, his coat less lustrous, but the steady rise and fall of his chest brought more comfort to Emily than anything else in the world. A complicated network of tubes and monitors surrounded him, testament to the severity of his condition and the extraordinary measures taken to save him. "How's our patient doing today?" Dr. Michaela Rodriguez asked, entering the room with Max's chart. Emily smiled cautiously. "He opened his eyes earlier and recognized me. He tried to wag his tail." "That's excellent progress," Dr. Rodriguez said, checking Max's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "His latest blood work shows remarkable improvement. That transfusion from the police department's K9 unit made a huge difference." Emily nodded gratefully, remembering how the local police officers had brought their service dogs in as blood donors when they learned a heroic dog needed help. It was just one of many kindnesses they'd experienced since arriving in Fairbanks. "When can we take him home?" Emily asked, the question she posed daily. "Doctor," Rodriguez's expression softened. "Soon. I think he's responding well to the antibiotics, and the surgical site is healing cleanly, maybe by the end of next week. If he continues this way. Hope bloomed in Emily's chest. After 3 surgeries and countless anxious nights, the possibility of bringing Max home seemed almost too good to be true. She leaned forward to whisper in the dog's ear. "Did you hear that? Max? You're getting better. We'll go home soon." As if in response, Max's eyes fluttered open, those warm brown eyes that had kept watch over Emily since she was 5. Though clouded with medication, they fixed on her face with unmistakable recognition. His tail moved weakly against the blankets. "I'll give you 2 some time, Doctor," Rodriguez said, slipping quietly from the room, left alone with Max. Emily continued her daily ritual of updating him on everything happening in their world. She described the comfortable apartment where she and her father were staying temporarily, the federal investigators who came daily to collect more information, and the journalists who wanted to interview them about Northland Pharmaceuticals. "Dad says we shouldn't talk to them yet," she explained seriously to Max. "Agent Harmon says the same thing. The case is too important to risk compromising it by saying the wrong thing to reporters." Max blinked slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Jake visits every day," Emily continued. "His arm is in a sling, but he's walking better now. He says he owes you his life because you taught him about loyalty." She smiled, remembering Jake's awkward but sincere words. "He's helping Dad organize all the evidence for the federal prosecutors. They say it's one of the biggest environmental crime cases in Alaska's history." A soft knock at the door interrupted her monologue. Emily looked up to see her father standing there, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "How's he doing?" Robert asked, approaching the bed cautiously. "Better," Emily said. "Dr. Rodriguez thinks he might come home next week." Robert nodded, placing a gentle hand on Max's uninjured shoulder. The dog's tail gave another weak thump in response. "Emily," Robert began, sitting in the chair opposite her, "there's something we need to discuss. About what happens after Max comes home." The seriousness in her father's tone made Emily tense. "What do you mean?" Robert sighed, running a hand through his beard, now more gray than brown. "The federal prosecutors want us to testify in the case against Northland. It means traveling to Anchorage, maybe even to Seattle or Washington, D.C. "That's okay," Emily said cautiously. "Max can come with us, right?" "Of course," her father assured her. "But that's only part of it. Agent Harmon has suggested, he thinks it might be safer if we don't return to the cabin, at least not permanently." Emily felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. "But it's our home. Mom helped build it." "I know, sweetheart," Robert said gently. "And we don't have to decide immediately. But Northland is a powerful corporation with a lot of resources. Even with their executives facing charges, there could be people willing to discourage our testimony." "You mean hurt us," Emily translated bluntly. "Like they hurt Mom." Robert flinched but nodded. "Agent Harmon has suggested the witness security program. It would mean new names, a new place to live, far from Alaska." "No." Emily's vehemence startled even herself. "I won't leave Mom behind. Her memories are in our cabin, in the forest she loved. I won't let them take that away too." Robert seemed torn between pride in his daughter's fierce determination and fear for her safety. "Emily, your mother would want you to be safe above everything else." "Mom would want us to stand our ground," Emily countered. "She gave her life to expose what Northland was doing. She wouldn't want us to run away and hide." Before Robert could respond, Sarah Collins appeared in the doorway, her expression suggesting she'd overheard at least part of their conversation. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but Jake asked me to bring these." She held up a stack of documents. "The preliminary hearing dates for the Northland case. Robert gestured her in, clearly grateful for the temporary reprieve from their difficult discussion. As Sarah approached, she paused to stroke Max's head, murmuring gentle praise that made his tail stir again. "He looks much better today," she observed, her professional eye assessing his condition. "Dr. Rodriguez says maybe next week for discharge," Emily informed her. Sarah nodded approvingly before turning to Robert. "I couldn't help overhearing about the witness security suggestion." Robert sighed. "Harmon thinks it's the safest option." Sarah placed the documents on a side table, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about this too. My research facility outside Circle Hot Springs has a caretaker's house that's sitting empty. It's on secure grounds with surveillance and staff present year-round." "You're offering us a place to stay?" Robert asked, surprised. "More than that," Sarah replied. "I'm offering you a job. Robert, we need someone with your expertise in environmental biology. The position comes with the house, security, and proximity to your support network here." She glanced meaningfully at Emily. "And it's close enough to visit the cabin regularly once the trial is over, but secure enough to keep you safe during proceedings." Emily looked between the adults, hope rising. "We could stay in Alaska, near our home." "It's an option," Sarah said carefully. "One that might balance safety with your desire to remain connected to Catherine's memory." Robert appeared stunned by the unexpected solution. "Sarah, that's incredibly generous. But the risk to your facility is one I'm willing to take," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Catherine was my best friend. I should have done more when she first raised concerns about Northland." Her voice softened with regret. "This is my chance to help finish what she started." The sincerity in Sarah's offer seemed to touch something in Robert. He nodded slowly, visibly processing this alternative to the drastic measures suggested by the federal authorities. "We'd need to discuss security details with Agent Harmon," he said finally. "But thank you, Sarah. Truly." A small noise from Max drew everyone's attention. The German shepherd had lifted his head slightly from the pillow, his eyes more alert than they'd been in days. Emily immediately leaned closer. "What is it? Boy, are you uncomfortable?" To everyone's surprise, Max struggled to sit up, his determination evident despite his weakness. Emily gently supported his shoulders, helping him achieve a more upright position. "Max, you need to rest," Sarah cautioned, but there was wonder in her voice at the dog's sudden animation. Once partially upright, Max turned his head deliberately toward Emily's jacket, which hung on the back of her chair. His gaze was so intent that Emily followed it, confused. "What? Max, what do you want?" The dog whined softly, still staring at the jacket. A flash of understanding hit Emily her mother's letter, still carried in the inside pocket. She'd been unable to bring herself to read it, carrying it everywhere but keeping its contents sealed away, like a talisman whose power might diminish once revealed. "I think he wants you to read Catherine's letter," Robert said quietly, noticing the direction of Max's gaze. Emily swallowed hard. "How does he even know about it?" Sarah smiled gently. "Dogs understand more than we give them credit for, and Max always had a special connection to your mother." With trembling fingers, Emily retrieved the worn envelope from her jacket. The paper had softened with handling, its creases deeply embedded from years in Jake's safekeeping and weeks in Emily's pocket. Her name on the front, Emily, written in her mother's flowing script, seemed both an invitation and a farewell. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. Robert moved his chair closer, placing an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever Catherine wrote, we'll face it together." Drawing courage from her father's presence and Max's unwavering gaze, Emily carefully broke the seal of the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered on both sides with her mother's handwriting. She took a deep breath and began to read aloud. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer with you, at least not in the way I wish I could be. First, and most importantly, I love you more than anything in this world. Nothing, not distance, not time, not even death can change that. I'm writing this letter because my work has put me in a position where certain powerful people might wish me harm. I pray this letter will never need to be delivered, but I've learned that hope must be balanced with preparation. Emily, you are the bravest, brightest spirit I've ever known. Even as a little girl, you've shown wisdom and compassion that many adults never achieve. These qualities will serve you well in the difficult days that might follow my absence. I've asked Max to watch over you if I cannot. He may seem like just a dog to others, but you and I know better. He carries a piece of my heart with him, and his loyalty to you is my final gift. Trust him always, he will protect you when I cannot. To your father, if he's reading this with you, Robert, my love, don't let grief or guilt consume you. Continue our work if you can do so safely, but remember that Emily's well-being must come first. Don't let my absence rob her of her remaining parent. And please, don't shut out the world or those who want to help. You've always been stronger with allies than alone. Emily, there's something important I want you to understand. The work your father and I do protecting the wilderness, holding corporations accountable for their actions, it isn't just about science or laws. It's about love. Love for the places that sustain us, for the future generations who deserve clean water and air, and for the interconnected web of life that includes even the smallest creatures. This love isn't always easy. Sometimes it requires sacrifice and courage. Sometimes it means standing up when others remain seated. But it is always, always worth it. Whatever happens after you read this, please remember 3 things. First, find joy every day, even in small moments. I found it in your laughter, in the sight of eagles soaring over our cabin, in the quiet companionship of your father by the fire. Second, fear is natural, but don't let it rule your choices. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Third, and most importantly, you are never alone. I am with you in every sunrise, in every snowfall, in every moment when you feel most connected to the natural world we both love so dearly. Max will remind you of this when your heart feels heaviest. Let him guide you back to joy when grief seems overwhelming. All my love, now and always. Mom. Emily's voice broke on the final word, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Robert's arm tightened around her shoulders, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Even Sarah dabbed at her eyes, momentarily turning away to compose herself. On the bed, Max had settled back against his pillows, seemingly satisfied now that the letter had been read. His brown eyes remained fixed on Emily, reflecting a depth of understanding that transcended species. Emily carefully folded the letter and held it against her heart, feeling as though her mother had somehow reached across the chasm of loss to embrace her one last time. The words had brought pain, certainly, but also a strange peace confirmation that her mother had known the risks but chosen to stand firm anyway, driven by love for her family and the wild places they called home. "Dad," Emily said finally, her voice steadying, "I think Mom would want us to accept Sarah's offer. Stay in Alaska, finish her work, but stay safe while doing it." Robert nodded slowly, visibly moved by Catherine's words. "I think you're right." Emily turned back to Max, gently taking his paw in her hand. "You kept your promise to Mom," she told him softly. "You protected me, just like she asked." In response, Max lifted his head just enough to lick the tears from her hand, a gesture so tender that it started a fresh flow. But these tears felt different, cleansing rather than depleting, acknowledging loss while embracing what remained. Outside the window, the Alaskan winter was beginning to soften toward spring. Sunlight lingered longer each day, promising renewal after the long dark. Emily watched a raven land on a branch near the window, its black feathers iridescent in the afternoon light. The bird cocked its head, regarding the scene inside with what seemed like knowing interest before spreading its wings and soaring away into the endless blue sky. "We're going to be okay," Emily whispered, not sure if she was speaking to her father, to Max, to herself, or perhaps to her mother's spirit. "All of us. Together." Max's tail thumped twice against the bed, weak but deliberate, a canine affirmation of her declaration. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as Catherine would have wanted, with courage, purpose, and an unbreakable bond forged in both joy and adversity. As the sunlight streamed through the window, warming Max's resting form and illuminating the small family gathered around him, Emily felt her mother's presence more strongly than she had since the accident. Not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as an enduring legacy of love that would continue to guide them forward through justice for Northland's crimes, through Max's recovery, and into whatever future awaited them in the wilderness they all called home. In the frozen wilderness of Alaska, we discovered a truth that resonates with all who've weathered life's seasons. Our greatest strength emerges when protecting those we love. Emily's journey reminds us of the children and grandchildren who look to us for safety in an uncertain world, while Max embodies the unwavering loyalty we cherish in our oldest companions. This story speaks to those of us who've faced corporate giants threatening our communities, who've experienced the heart-wrenching loss of a spouse too soon, or who've witnessed the environment we hope to preserve for future generations being despoiled by unchecked greed. It honors the letters we've written to loved ones, containing wisdom we pray they'll never need prematurely. Most powerfully, it affirms that even in our autumn years, we remain essential protectors of both family legacies and natural treasures. Like Robert finding purpose in continuing Catherine's mission, we too can transform our accumulated wisdom into meaningful action. The bond between a child, her loyal dog, and the parents who shaped her reminds us that love transcends loss and that our most important work may still lie ahead, guiding those who will carry our values forward when we no longer can.